Hello again to another agricultural reaction. Today we will be watching Are vegetables becoming less nutritious? Slash the unforeseen impact of industrial farming from Mary Johansson. Okay. This is a new channel to me. Topic is interesting, so I figured we can try it out. So let's just go jump in and see.
Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gita Marie and today we're talking about an issue that isn't talked a lot about in a very nuanced way. See, I read something recently that sort of freaked me out. I read that a lot of the food that we're eating today have practically no nutritional value compared to the same food products 100 years ago. Moreover, the soil we grow our food in has practically no minerals left, is what I heard. I started looking into this and let me tell you, the headlines are quite discouraging. But I'm also left pretty confused because it seems like a lot of industry professionals and scientists are pretty much in total disagreement when it comes to why this is a problem, what's causing it, and how big the problem is. So I thought I wanted to dedicate today's video to dive into some of the arguments in both directions and see what's up and down here. Our fruits are juicier than ever. However, during the last 80 years, food in grocery stores has become bigger and bigger and juicier because it's getting a lot more difficult to grab the attention of consumers. We're sort of expecting a certain aesthetic level when it comes to the food that we want to buy. We are not buying small pruny vegetables at this point. We want them plump. But just because we pick the biggest apple in the bunch doesn't mean we're getting more bang for our buck. On the contrary, actually. In 2004, researchers at the University of Texas discovered that 43 staple foods showed a decrease in nutritional content up to 38% between the mid and late 20th century. According to that research, the calcium in green beans dropped from 65 to 37 milligrams. Vitamin A levels plummeted by almost half in asparagus, and broccoli stalks had less iron. Overall, the tendency was. But to add some more recent research, a 2018 study documented the declining nutrient value in some staple food crops due to rising CO2 levels. They tested rice and found that higher CO2 levels reduced its protein, iron, and zinc content. The program lead at the International Food Policy Research Institute explained that because of climate change, iron and zinc have been dipping by 30 to 40% due to excessive rainfall, cold, and physical damage. We are seeing decreasing nutritional value in many different types of foods, but especially in fruit and vegetables. And it all started with the Green Revolution. Prompted by food shortages after World War II, scientists developed certain high-yield crops. They also started intensely breeding certain types of livestock. They also developed synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and insecticides, coupled with improvements on irrigation and cheaper tractors. Crop productivity increased drastically. The average global cereal yield rose 175% between 1961 and 2014.
So
Wheat, for example, rose with an average yield from 1.1 tons per hectare to 3.4 tons per hectare. This development was motivated by the wish to secure the global food system and avoid vast malnutrition. But I also think there was an aspect of how much money can we make on the same land.
Yeah.
You tell me. And there are other factors that motivate constant renewability and innovation in the food sector, like extreme weather conditions like droughts and heavy rain. And also an increase in population has played a really big part in this development. In 1960, we were around 3 billion people on Earth, and now we are around 8.3. So this is an aspect as well. In 2022, Rothamsted Research wrote in their Facts on Fake News segment that soil depletion due to climate change was a misunderstanding or a myth, or not specifically correct at least. They wrote that the nutritional and mineral contents of the soil had not decreased, and that the decreasing nutritional content of food had nothing to do with the soil it was grown in. I guess that article was sort of reacting to the same headlines that caught my attention in the first place. Now, they interviewed 2 experts on the subject, and here are the highlights. First of all, it's difficult to compare nutritional content of crops like wheat because the content varies depending on the environment and the condition of the soil. You can't just compare wheat from different fields and call it a day. So in order to actually show a difference in nutritional value overall, you would need clinically controlled environments, and there are very few studies that have actually done this. There is data that shows how the nutrient level in wheat crops have remained stable between 1975 and up until 1960, but after this point it has decreased significantly. One effect that may contribute to the decreased mineral content is yield dilution, because during the green revolution of the 1960s, new wheat varieties were bred to have higher yields. While these varieties produced bigger and more grains, that also meant an increased amount of starch, which dilutes other grain components, like minerals. The solutions to the increasing cases of micronutrient malnutrition includes supplementation, diversification of diet, and biofortification of crops. However, the low concentration and lack of bioavailability of nutrients in some of these crops is so severe that even micronutrient improved varieties sometimes do not reach the targets for supplying dietary requirements. And this is a major problem for people that depend on these stable cereals. Studies suggest that semi-dwarf wheats also contain less minerals even when grown under the same conditions side by side with all variations of wheat. And this demonstrates that it's clearly a genetic effect and not due to environmental factors. So according to these experts, climate change-driven soil depletion is not to blame for the decreasing amount of nutrients in our food. It's more so a yield-obsessed agricultural sector that's to blame here. And that all started in the 1960s. And this is coincidentally during the same time where industrial animal agriculture, factory farming, also became really widespread. And that's going terrifically. A whole other type of man-made problem. Now I know that I'm just throwing some lingo around here, and it can be really hard to keep up with the shop talk. This is also not my shop, so I'm also just hanging on for dear life here. But if you've thought twice about the term biofortification, you're not the only one. So let's talk about that. This is one of the main solutions I have seen a lot of scientists and experts bring up. We have been fortifying our crops for decades, simply by adding extra nutrients to finished food products. We enriched tons of processed foods, milk and cereal being two very obvious examples here. So shout out to my oat milk that's fortified with B12. The industrial food system has also enriched salt with iodine since 1920 to reduce mineral deficiency. As such, adding minerals to food is not new, but how and why we do it is constantly changing. Biofortification is an alternative to regular fortification, where the lost or just additional nutrients is added to the genes of the seed and plant. It can be done through conventional crop breeding or by genetically modifying them. The World Health Organization, as well as the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, has deemed the development of biofortified foods as one of the key components in achieving food security. However, other experts say that biofortification is a band-aid and not as much a complete solution, because a considerable part of the problems we see in our global food system today has to do with the fact that we're relying very, very heavily on monoculture farming, on massive scale monoculture farming. And relying more on biofortification in foods means that we have to rely even more so on intensive monoculture farming if we want to remedy the issue this way. And fixing a problem by doing the exact same thing, just more, I don't know if that's gonna help. Another thing we could do is downscaling the food system. If we rely less on big manufacturers and more on local small-scale farming, we could solve a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve with biofortification. Currently, biofortification is receiving global praise, support, and funding, while the opportunities and solutions that involve downscaling the food system and relying more on small farmers do not have the same resources. There is, in other terms, a lot more money to be made designing, selling, and growing new and improved types of food crops in comparison to simply downscaling the food system. Who could have thought? No, I have no idea. No, this was completely unpredicted. There's no way we could have known. But ultimately, biofortification is really hard to avoid, and I also don't think that we should. It can't be our only solution here. Now, realize that I haven't made the impact video on GMO. That is still coming. It is in the work. But the conclusion, or sort of the main point, is basically the same, which is that it's inherently not a bad thing. Like, biofortification is not inherently bad because it is unnatural. There is tons of really good applications for this, and it's something that we really should be focusing on. It's an incredible tool, there's no doubt about it, but we need more tools in our global toolbox, because we can't really build a birdhouse with a hammer. Do we need genetically modified crops in the global food system? Probably, mainly because the conditions on our planet has changed drastically in a very short amount of time. Modifying crops, as we have done it all through history, simply takes too long compared to the scale and pace of climate change. Making crops drought resistant or resilient to certain climates mean being able to feed the expanding population. Genetically modified crops, or GMOs, isn't inherently a bad thing. On the contrary, as a matter of fact, but it is a tool, and there are risks and downsides just as there are upsides. But wasn't the conclusion just that this has nothing to do with climate change? It seems like it if we're looking at how certain papers and articles are laying out this issue, like Rothamsted research. It seems like the decreasing nutritional value of certain foods has nothing to do with climate change and nothing to do with the soil per se, that it has something to do with how the crops are genetically made up. However, climate change, the state of the planet, affects everything.
Yeah.
Especially so the stuff that grows on it.
Yep,
it affects
exactly.
so many different parameters that I think it's unscientific to not attribute some kind of impact to the state of the planet. And there are definitely also loads of data that suggests that climate change is a very significant factor here. So let's pull out that rice study from 2018 again. This study tested how 18 different kinds of rice responded to various CO2 levels. The technique they used was called free air CO2 enrichment, and it allowed them to grow the rice and add the CO2 to the air. They did this over multiple years in facilities in China and Japan, and this was the results. The data shows that higher CO2 levels reduced multiple key factors of rice's nutritional value. They observed a 10% decrease in protein, 8% in iron, and 5% in zinc. They also showed decreased levels of vitamin B, between 13 and 30% in rice that was grown in high CO2 environments. While some experts are certain that the decreased nutritional value of certain crops has nothing to do with climate change, others disagree. There's no single reason as to why the global food system is decreasing in nutrition. One aspect is related to the atmospheric levels of carbon dioxide, it seems. Yield dilution is definitely another factor, and the increased use of pesticides and herbicides also has an effect. Moreover, we're trying to solve monoculture-related problems with monoculture-related solutions, instead of scaling down and relying less on big manufacturers and more on local farms. These different issues add up, and they're kind of hard to tell apart because in the global food system, everything is very interconnected. In conclusion, there isn't one specific solution here, and I certainly don't have it. But what I can see and what I can conclude from this is that our food system today is incredibly fragile. We're relying very heavily on a limited amount of big-scale supplies and manufacturers, which means that not a lot has to go wrong before it starts affecting the entire supply chain. And this would happen a lot less if we were relying more so on small local farming. Obviously, that would also mean a more limited selection of certain foods in many areas, so there are also downsides to that. I don't necessarily think the solution is to not have any global enterprises that are working with the food system at all, because I feel like at this point we're kind of dependent on that structure as well. But we shouldn't rely solely on that structure.
Absolutely
there
right.
isn't just one problem, so there isn't just one solution here. And I don't actually know what consumers can do to improve this at this point. One thing that we can do is know about it, make sure our politicians and the people representing the industry is talking about this, because this is already a problem now, and it will only become more so of a problem in the future, especially for at-risk demographics. There are industry-made problems, and there are other types of man-made problems, meaning that there is the industry-related problem of yield dilution, because we want bigger foods, but we're not getting more bang for our buck here. But the other issue is climate change. The other issue is the atmospheric levels of carbon dioxide. And that's also a man-made problem, as human activity is the reason for climate change. There's no other time in the history of the planet where the developments and changes that we're seeing to the planet has happened with the pace that they're happening now. So it's all man-made, it's all the man-made problem. Anyway, I think relying more so on small-scale farming is going to seriously remedy this issue, but there are also definitely downsides to that. I hope that this gave you some type of, I was about to say hope, but that was not really the point of the video, to be honest. I hope this gave you nuance and knowledge so that we're more so equipped when we're talking about these issues and why they're important. Also, it gives us some kind of overview of how many different areas of our lives are actually changing because of climate change and big greedy corporations and industries. Oh, capitalism, what are we doing? Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a comment of any kind, leave it down below. Let me know what you think, and let's share with the group. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day, and I will see you guys next time. Take really good care of yourselves. Until then, bye.
Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green, zero-waste content, and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!
She's funny. Yeah, I actually gonna say I agree with her a lot. There's a lot to do. You can't really, you know, the fact that we are relying on the monocultures a lot and it's happening with a lot of things, like with apples. I'm not saying, well, yeah, you can see different types of apples in the stores, but honestly, I made a reaction to History of Apples in America, and there was a time when they were using 16,000 different varieties of apples in America, and what's left from them now? It's barely nothing. Bananas are a big problem. They have a big problem as well. There's only one type of bananas that's actually readily available everywhere. It's a Cavendish banana, isn't it? So monoculture is not a good thing for everyone, especially that it's like I kind of leaning more into actually thinking that, yeah, the fact that all those
craving a juicy burger plus a juicy
go away, all those what I was trying to say, oh yeah, all those man-made modified varieties are less nutritious. It could be, I think that's most likely the reason why they're less nutritious, because they just like devaluate the thing. There's more starch, there's less. They bring more like in weight and all, and they're bigger, but the nutritious value is gonna be smaller. So I'm actually agreeing with a lot what she said. We shouldn't rely just on the massive companies that they, on the monocultures and big farms and stuff like that. We should kind of be more using smaller farms that they local as well. But it's just the money aren't there. She said that too. The money are just not there in the small farms. They're just not going to be profitable. And people, if they want to buy from small farms, they're gonna have to pay more, and not everyone can afford that. So yeah, that's the problem too. Great video from Gitte-Marie Johansson, and I'm definitely gonna watch some other things from her. Maybe not in reaction, but in general. So thank you very much for watching. I see you tomorrow. Bye.